Hello, Garland Nixon here, and the Biden team is having a summit this week in Washington, D.C. On Africa. Let's talk. Hi, Garland here, and the Biden administration is having a summit this week in Washington, D.C., and it's supposedly going to strengthen the ties between the Biden administration and Africa. Now, first of all, Africa is a continent. It is not a country. I think there's 50, 55, I don't know how many countries, but there are a lot of countries in Africa. How's that? There may be three. I don't know. Here's the bottom line. There's more than one country in Africa. So the fact that you're like looking at Africa as one country already says you don't kind of understand Africa, and you don't see it as kind of a legitimate, you don't recognize the legitimate interests of various countries and how they may be different. The cultures are different. The histories of various countries are different. But to the Biden team, Africa is Africa. You've seen one part of Africa, you've seen it all. And so that's why I think they're already on the wrong foot. I went to this thing called the People's Forum yesterday, and it was people from Africa, and they had a forum to discuss this summit and the things that they thought were important. And I will report a little bit back to you from that. It was obvious that the people do not see the Biden administration, do not see the United States as an ally that is going to treat them as equals, that's going to take their interest into account. And historically speaking, you can certainly understand why. I mean, why would the South Americans and Latin Americans, the Asians, etc., see the U.S. With its very violent history in their regions as a potential ally? They see them not as a potential ally, but as a current oppressor, to be honest. That's the way they see the US, right? And in talking to them, I'm not saying that they see Russia and China as their saviors, but I'll put it like this. They don't view Russia and China in the same light as they do the US. In talking to Africans, it varies. There are some, let's be straightforward. There are some African people that are very suspicious of any outside powers with a lot of money and a lot of power coming to Africa to offer them deals because of their history with colonial powers. It only makes sense, you know. They look at the history and they say, you know, the colonial powers came here, they wanted our resource, they did very bad things to us to access our resources. So when they see China and Russia, and all right, that's kind of weird. I got dropped out, but now I'm back. So let's try it again. It just said try again. So I got dropped. Who knows? Maybe software issues, but let's continue. So, and it makes sense. You know what I mean? If you look at the history of Africa, if you look at the history of Latin America, the Middle East, etc., and their experience with the colonial powers, certainly, you know, they've been had all too many times, and they've had their governments overthrown, blah, blah, blah. So here's my point. While they certainly are wary of Russia and China, they are a lot more likely to strike a deal with them, in that they're like, okay, we don't know about these deals. We're watching these deals. We're keeping, you know, it's like, we're watching you, Russia and China. We got our eyes on you. I think there's a lot of doing deals with Russia and China, evaluating them and seeing whether or not in the long run they end up getting schnooked again, right? So that's why, you know, some people will just make the argument, oh, Russia and China are there to save Africa and Africans love them, and they're no. I'll put it like this. They seem to currently have a much better relationship in many parts of Africa with Russia and China than they do the traditional colonial powers, but they are keeping their eyes on them. They're watching them. They are wary. And let me add this. Anybody who does business It's very reasonable. That's what you should do. You should be wary when you're doing business, especially if you are the economically weaker power. If you've got a company and you're doing business with a more powerful company, then you better have some good lawyers and you better write those agreements up so that they protect you, right? So that's why I'm saying I'm not taking a position that China and Russia are rushing in to save Africa. I personally think that would be the advantage of Russia and China for one. They tend to be non-interference, right? They tend to say, we're coming in here to do a business deal. We're not going to tell you to do some human rights changes. We're not going to tell you you got to respect this community or that community, or your religion is not working, or your view on women is not working, or whatever the case may be. We're not going to try to say you have to become us culturally. I think Russia and China more like, look, we're trying to get paid. We're trying to eat. You're trying to eat. Let's figure out a way we can all eat. Look, as I said, if I'm doing business with somebody like that and they're more powerful than me, the important thing is that I ensure that the writings, that the legalese on these deals benefits me and or protects me. And if I don't get that, then I can kind of blame myself. If I write it, if I do, I've done business before. If I don't get the deal right, then I got to eat it later. So they're fair to be wary, and they're fair to say, these people have a non-interference clause that's better than the people that just come in and overthrow our government. Because let's face it, the history of the colonial powers is they come in, they say, we want a deal. Oh, by the way, we want all of your resources and you'll get no money. And if you don't like it, we'll overthrow your government and kill everybody and put somebody new in that will give us everything we want. And you'll suffer and be impoverished either way, right? That ain't a deal most people want to bite the hook on, right? Most people are going to look at that and say, I don't want to sign that. Of course, they know traditionally with the colonial powers, if you say, I don't want to sign that, then they say, well, then we will kill you. They've got a saying in Spanish. Some people may know it. In Latin America, it's a saying that the gangs and the drug gangs usually use. And those who speak Spanish would understand it. But here's what it means: the silver or the lead, right? Basically, what it means is this: I'm going to offer you a bribe. You're a government official, you're a powerful official, the silver or the lead. A drug dealer comes in and says, I'm going to offer you a bribe. I will give you $100,000 to turn your head. You can take that $100,000. Now, if you don't take that 100,000, then I'll kill you. I'll put lead in you, and then I'll start over again with whoever takes your place. That's the silver or the lead. And that has been the traditional relationship between the colonial powers and Africa. Let's face it, that has been it, right? Ask Thomas Sankara, ask Kwame Nkrumah, on and on and on, right? The history, and throughout the Latin America and on, the silver or the lead. So now I think the Africans don't view Russia and China as making that same offer of the silver or the lead. And we shall see how the deals work out with Russia and China, is what it is. I have heard, I will add this, I have heard some Africans say this also when it comes to China. China produces a lot of cheap goods, right? And some of the stuff like Americans don't want. We're like, oh God, a $15 pair of tennis shoes. I don't want those. I got to get these Jordans that are 150, right? 200, whatever, right? Whereas in Africa, you couldn't afford those. Forget that $150 Jordans. No, but you can buy a $10 or $15 pair of sneakers, a $5 pair of sneakers, something really, really what we consider cheap goods that we wouldn't be seen, oh no, I wouldn't be seen with this on my feet, right? In America. So now Africans can say, I can buy new goods. I can have a new pair of sneakers. I can have a new shirt. I can buy this cheap made washing machine that if I buy one in the US, it's going to cost me $700, but I can buy this cheap Chinese one for $150, right? I can afford a washing machine. So there are a lot of things, goods that are made very inexpensive in China, and we may call them cheap junk, but in Africa, it's something they can afford. It is a price they can afford. So now they can acquire goods that they couldn't previously acquire. And if I only make $100 and something costs 400, I can't buy it. But if I can get that same thing for 50 or $60, or maybe I can get it for $100, now maybe I can buy it. So that's one of the differences they see in Africa, that Africa sees with China in particular. Okay, so let's continue. One of the things you got to look at in the relationship is now, presently, what is the relationship between the US, excuse me, and the African countries? I'm going to do a couple things here. Let's look at a couple things here that I think are important. This is one that you have to look at that I think is having great consequence on how the Africans view the US. Gregory Meeks is a what many of us in Black Americans refer to as a member of the Black misleadership class, right? The Black misleadership class, the capo class, one might say, the comprador class, right? And that would be a group of people who, because of their particular race or ethnicity, right, they are able to rise to a high level, but and rather than use that ability and that power they have to help people in their group, they simply become part of the machine, and they simply fill their own pockets, feather their own nest, and they don't help other people, right? They don't help people in their group if they're from a what we'll call a marginal group or disempowered group. I don't give a crap what you use, but you get my point, right? To make it simple, Gregory Meeks is a Black guy, and a lot of people in the Black community would like to expect, well, he's a powerful Black person, maybe he should look out for his group. And that's not abnormal. There's nothing abnormal there. If a Jewish person or a Latino person or a gay person or whoever gets in a powerful position, people within that group would say, hey, man, look out for the people in your group. I know I used to have a very powerful friend who was a Greek, who was a lobbyist. And, look, and I found there's Greek people in Congress. There's Greek people in powerful positions. The Greek community is very, very tight, and they help each other out. Look, there ain't nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing, I guess. If everybody does that, then we'll all be better off. But, that's understandable, right? Okay. But what does Meek do? Look at this. Countering malign Russian activities in Africa Act. Gregory Meeks put that forward, right? Basically, it's the U.S. And look what he says. He makes a statement. I'm proud of the exceptional show of bipartisan support. As soon as I see that word bipartisan, I know we're getting screwed. Somebody's getting screwed. Everybody's getting screwed. For support of the Countering Malign Russian Activities in Africa Act, which passed out of the House earlier. It is a demonstration of how Putin's war in Ukraine and the Kremlin's corrupt and illicit activities in Africa to fund that war and other exploits have worked to unify Congress and the international community. Well, apparently not the Africans. Now, as we continue to apply pressure on Putin and his agents for carrying out war crimes, blah, 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 we'll continue to seek avenues which it can pilfer, manipulate, and exploit resources in parts of Africa to evade sanctions. So So the problem they have is they've got to protect Africa. This is Gregory Meeks implying that the United States is going to protect Africa, right? This bill, the United States stands with the people of Ukraine. All innocent people have been victimized, blah, blah, blah. Gross violation of human rights in Africa, including in the Central African Republic and Mali. This bill enlists the resources of the State Department and other fellow agents to examine the Russian Federation's activities in Africa, hold those complicit in these activities to account. So what are they saying here? What he's saying is, if businesses and countries in Africa do business with Russia, the United States is going to come in and sanction them and screw them over. This ain't about Russia. It's about saying to the Africans in the old colonialist way, in the old imperialist way, old school, man, they're going old school. And they're saying, African countries, if you do business with Russia, then we're going to punish you. It's colonialism. It's imperialism. It's saying we, the United States, has a right to control the Africans' foreign policy and economic policy. We have no right to do that. But there's Gregory Meeks, a Black man, screwing over the Africans. Oh, what a shock, right? So that's number one. Let's look at this other thing. So they're having this summit for Africa, whatever, right? Well, let me ask you a question. Here's the first thing you need to know. Where is it? You're having a summit to look out for the Africans' interest when it comes to green stuff and climate change stuff and all that kind of stuff. Oh, really? Where are you having it? In DC? Why wouldn't you have it in Africa? And you're looking out for the Africans. Oh, we got to help those Africans. Biden bars Mali, Burkina Faso, and others from the U.S.-Africa Summit. He's barred Mali, Burkina Faso, Sudan, and Guinea from attending the summit. This was made known by the White House, adding that 4 African countries have been suspended by the African Union due to the coup d'etat. Currently 4 countries. So they're saying they're not invited. They invited all sub-Saharan and North African governments that have not been suspended by the African Union. Uh, so here's the bottom line. And look, the summit will ride on the advantage that the Russia Africa version is not forthcoming as Russia is engaged with Ukraine. So here's the bottom line. The United States is passing laws that says if African countries and African business choose their right to choose to do business with Africa and China, they will be punished. Doesn't sound like they're respecting the independence and sovereignty of Africa, does it? They're also saying we'll pick and choose which African countries are allowed to come, right? Why? Now, what's going on with Mali and these other countries, Burkina Faso? The U.S. Colony of France has been in Africa for centuries, robbing the damn African people blind, and it's still robbing the African people blind. And countries such as Mali and Burkina Faso have said to the French, get the hell out. They got a right to. They have a right to. It's their countries, and they're saying to France, get the hell out. We don't want you here no more. Go home. As they used to say back in the day at the bars, you don't have to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here, right? And let me add this. What is Mali doing? Mali has invited the Wagner Group, right? Who is the Wagner Group? The Wagner Group, as we call it here, right? The Russians, the Wagner. In my opinion, the French Foreign Legion, right? You recall the French Foreign Legion, they bring people in. It was kind of a French mercenary group that the French would use as an army, but they weren't really technically French soldiers, right? What is the Blackwater? They've changed the name now in the US, right? It's a US mercenary group where some guy, Eric Prince, brings in all of these people. It's not supposedly the real military. They're paid by the government as contractors to go out and do all kinds of stuff. But the French Foreign Legion, the Blackwater or whatever the hell their name is, that's to me what the Wagner Group is. I could be wrong, but that's my interpretation of the Wagner Group or the Wagner Group, right? It's kind of the French Foreign Legion, kind of mercenaries that are used by the Russian government that are paid. It's nothing unusual. People like the Wagner Group. This is nothing unusual. Powerful countries do this. We're doing it. France does it. Other countries do it. That's who they are. So Mali has invited in the Wagner Group. Bottom line is, Mali said, get the hell out, France and the neo-colonialists, and we'll decide we want Russia to be in here. And so you guys won't overthrow our government, right? Man, look, it's their country. This is my thing. It's their country. I really do believe in sovereignty and independence of countries. I don't have to like what a country's doing, whether it's Viktor Orban. What do you hear with the liberal class in America? Oh my God, he's a right-wing madman. He's nuts. He's insane. Viktor Orban's a far right-wing kook, blah, 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 blah. Right now, if I had to spend a winter in Europe and I had to choose between Germany and Hungary, it's a whole lot warmer in Hungary, right? So Germany, they're going to freeze their asses off. Call them a far right-wing madman all you want to. You turn on the heat and you get warm. So maybe he ain't as mad as some would think. And what we're seeing also is a situation where people are looking at the difference between a government that is practical, right? That says, man, we got to eat, dude. I mean, I know you guys want to do this or that to Russia or China. We're just trying to eat. That's my famous word. We're just trying to eat, right? Orban's like, we're just trying to eat, dude. Chill out. We ain't enough. You guys want all kind of war and neocon U.S. colonial projects. But we here in Hungary just trying to put something on the plate. We don't want an empty plate, and we don't want to wake up to our drinks sitting in our bedrooms, freezing beside the, frozen hard beside the nightstand. Is that too much to ask? Does that make you a crazy right-wing madman? Not really. I may disagree with some of their policies, so it doesn't matter. If I respect independence and sovereignty, then the Hungarians voted for the Orban government. That's what the hell they want. It's none of my damn business. Go forth and do what you feel that your history and your culture and your country, the direction that it takes you in, that's the direction that you go. It ain't none of my damn business. I believe in that. So we get back to Africa. So the U.S. now is saying we're going to call the Africans, and now the ones that they select. See, if you're looking out for the best interest of Africa, you would send a note to each African government, every single one, and say, we'd like to have a summit with you about relationship with your government. Number one, we want the leaders of Africa to select the city, the location that we're going to have that. We want you to choose your representatives, and we would like to work with you since, now this is President Nixon saying this. I'm president. I'm saying two things. This is about a relationship between a respectful relationship. So here's what we're going to do. We want you to choose 50% of the agenda, and we'll choose 50% of the agenda. In fact, we want each country to have, we'll have, if there's 49 countries, but there should be like 53 or 4, however many countries there is in Africa, each country should have one numbered segment. This is yours. This is your issue. 1 through 53, or however many countries it is, right? 54? I thought it was 55, but I don't know. And you never know because that changes. Number one, each country puts a bullet point in there, and we have to discuss that. Number two, we'll put now here's the thing I'd say if I'm the US. Everybody gets one bullet point, and so do we. We get one. We don't get any more than the rest of the people. We get one. But that ain't the way it's working. The US is going to select the people to come, put together the agenda, and attempt to impose it on the Africans. That's the way the neocons work. They impose their will on everybody. Why? Because we're the unipolar hegemon. We're the indispensable nation. We're exceptional. Everybody has to listen to us. Well, you know what? The Africans, you know what they are likely to do? Pick some people that are going to go along with their agenda. Bring them in here. They're going to talk green stuff. They're going to talk about carbon footprints and things like that. But here's the bottom line. The U.S. has like one of the biggest carbon footprints in the world. We put out the most stuff. What are we talking to them for about that? If the Biden team wants to reduce our carbon footprint, then reduce our carbon footprint. You don't need to talk to countries that don't have much of a carbon footprint to reduce yours. But I would argue this. The U.S. produces energy, gas, oil, things of that nature. Nigeria produces energy. These other countries produce energy. It seems to me that one of the world's largest energy producers are talking to the other countries about energy. I don't think it's going to be in their best interest. I think the U.S. is going to maybe say to some of these other countries that produce energy, maybe you should stop producing so much oil and gas. And if they were to say, well, are you going to stop? Well, no. But when you stop, it'll drive the price up and we'll make more money. But you'll get poorer because you won't be selling any. If the U.S. really, you know what? There's an old joke, an old saying here in the U.S. I'm from Missouri. Show me, Missouri's the show me state. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Demonstrate it to me. If the U.S. wants Africa to do something, right? My dad used to have a saying, children don't listen, they watch and learn, right? His big thing was, man, if your children turn up screwed up, you better look in the mirror because they learn by watching you. Don't say, my kids are all screwed up. I don't know how that happened. That may be part of the problem. If you don't know how it happened and your kids are all screwed up, that's part of the problem, right? And that's just throwing it out there. But bottom line is, what the U.S. needs to do is say to Africa, look, we're going to make the following changes. This. We're going to demonstrate over a 2-3 year period how we're going to do this, and we'd like you to follow suit. But we understand that your situation is different. That's why we want to show you the sacrifices we're willing to make. Not bring people in, lecture them, preach to them. They see it as a threat. The history of the U.S. is when the U.S. talked to Africa, it was, we'd like you to do this. And if the African leader said no, he was a dead man. He was out of office. And I don't mean that they gave him a ride to the nearest cab station, to the nearest train station. I mean, he was murdered and tortured and blown up and killed. If he was lucky, he was able to escape the country with his life. His government was overthrown and they brought in a bunch of compradors that would come in and give him everything they want. And might I add, let me add this, something that I already knew, people might have learned from Ukraine. Here's what people think happens, and here's what really happens. We'll use Ukraine as an example. It could be any African country, Middle Eastern country. Here's what people think happens. The United States goes to country X, Ukraine or Nigeria. Nigeria is a perfect example also because Nigeria is a country that sells a lot of oil, has a lot of oil. The money only goes to 1% of the people. The other 99% are left in the dark. They're left poor, right? Ukraine, same thing, right? This is an old game. But what people think is this: well, okay, the United States comes to the president of to the people in charge of Nigeria or the people in charge of Ukraine, and they say, here's $100 billion, whatever the number is, right? And then the people of Ukraine or Nigeria, as it were, steal all the money and the people get nothing. Nope. I know people think that's the way it works, but that ain't the way it really works. Think about the FTX scam. US gives, let's just use $1 billion as a number. We know it's far higher, but for the sake of this argument, the US comes in and says to Ukraine, here's $1 billion, right? Just make sure everything's good on Rockfin. Yeah, we're still rolling. The US says, okay, here's the plan. Here's $1 billion. Now, the poor people here, the people here think, well, they're giving it to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians or Nigerians are going to take the money, and there's 10, let's say there's 10 oligarchs, there's 10 crooks. They'll each take their $1 billion come in, each of them will take 100 million. They'll filter it through their Cyprus, proxy corporations and things of that nature, and they'll all take the money. The FTX scandal teaches something else. Here's the way it works. The US gives $1 billion to Ukraine. The Ukrainians take 5%, right? They take 5%, which would be 50 million, right? They take the 5% and they disperse that amongst themselves, maybe even less, right? Let's say they take 25 million, right? They disperse it amongst themselves, and then it goes into their various, shadow companies and corporations and all these things, and it off it goes to various places. But what happened with FTX? What happened with this Bankman-Fried guy? They take, the U.S. gives them $1 billion. They take 975 million, just an example, and they launder it into FTX, right? Hey, we've got a war going on. We need to buy stuff. What are you going to do? I think we'll invest in crypto. That makes sense. So the US gives them $1 billion. And everybody thinks, oh yeah, they just launder it. They get a small chunk and they launder that small chunk, right? They get 2.5%. That's their cut. The other 97.5 gets laundered through FTX and back to the people here, right? The Democratic Party got 70 million. You think that was the only money that was coming back to the US and Europe and the UK and oligarchs there? So what's going on? What happens is when the US Treasury, when they take the money out and it's Africa, Nigeria, whoever, and they give this money to whatever country it is, right? Oh, we just gave $4 billion to Egypt. The people there take a small chunk. The rich people, the powerful people take a small chunk. The rest of it is then laundered and comes back to the criminals here in the United States. These things, people are like, why are we giving so much money to these countries? Why are we giving foreign aid to these countries? Why they just use it to buy bombs, and why couldn't we do this or that? We're not giving foreign aid to these countries. We're laundering the US Treasury through these companies so it can come back to the crooks and criminals in the US and in the in Europe. That's the bottom line. This thing, what hopefully Ukraine and the FTX scandal revealed to people who were paying attention is that the US foreign money game, money to this country, money to that country, money for war over here. Oh, this country's in trouble. Oh, they need more bombs. They need more weapons. They need more this. They need more that. That what that thing actually is that we've been complaining, why are we spending all this money on other countries? Really is a money washing operation. We're not giving money to other countries. We're filtering it through the other countries and bringing the bulk of it back to the crooked oligarchs here and in Europe. That's the whole game. And so the Africans are hip to that. They know that even their top 1% in Nigeria, that 1% that gets a portion of the oil money, they don't get much of it. They get enough of it. So in the context of Nigeria, they're rich and they ride around in BMWs and Mercedes. And in the context of their own country, they're wealthy. They've got a house and a compound and guards and all the things that they want. that they can afford. But if you're in Nigeria, $1 million, trust me, goes a long way, right? So when they filter $1 billion through there, if you get $1 million or two, whoo, man, you can buy a house there in Lagos or whatever. My house probably, which isn't just a regular old middle class person's house, not better or worse than anybody else's. My house in Lagos, the cost of my house in Lagos, living here in Maryland, where the cost of houses are high, would probably buy you a mansion in Nigeria. So somebody could get, that's why I say somebody who's got $1 million in one of those countries, just a small chunk of that laundered money is living like they got 100 million here. So they don't have to get as big a cut. So what they do is when you go through a poor country, a country that you want to keep poor, like Ukraine, when you launder that money through, see, if you launder money here, you got to give a bigger chunk to the crooks because there's a high cost of living. If you launder money through Ukraine, launder money through Nigeria, launder money through whatever the hell country in Africa or in some poor area, South America, the people there got to they only need a smaller chunk because they can live wealthy on a couple million, and you take that 100 billion, 100 million, whatever back, you get the big chunk. That's the game plan, man. That's the game. It's always the game. That's the neoliberal game, money laundering. Well, it's after 10 and I got to get ready to head to my office, but I did want to have a discussion about that. Just a discussion about this Africa summit, what's revealed, what the African people intuitively know before they read anything about the summit. They have history. Using the context of history, the African people, the Middle Eastern people, the Latin American people, on and on and on, will look at the context of history and say, these people have been robbing us for centuries. There's no reason to think that they're calling us together to look out for us. And what the hell do you know? They won't allow us to choose our representatives. They want to have it in their land, and they want to say which country can and can't go. And they've just passed a law that says they're going to screw us if we try to use our independence and sovereignty to determine who we want to do business with ourselves. Yeah. Okay, that's going to work real good. We saw how this summit of the Americas or whatever the hell it was they had in Los Angeles a while back, where they did the same thing and they decided, well, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, the countries that are on the American overthrow list, they're not allowed to come. And there was a pushback, there was a backlash. Mexico, President of Mexico, a bunch of other countries says, well, I ain't going because it's a fraud. It's a neocon fraud and another neocon disaster. And at the end, they will be laughed at and they will be panned universally. It's already universally being panned in Africa, and observers and people in Africa will look at it and say, what was this all about? Why'd you waste your time? We know what you're up to. All right. Thanks, everybody. Certainly appreciate people taking out their time. I will try real quickly. Sparky says, Telecom Act allowed previously forbidden news media industry consolidation while enabling unfettered electronic surveillance by the government. You got it. You got it. You're 100% on with that one, old Sparkster. How about Jai Wu says, feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the U.S. empire to finally collapse. Literal billions of people will finally be able to rise and develop their countries. The one thing I noticed when I talk to people from the global south, when I talk to people from Africa, when I talk to people from China, they all say now, yeah, the U.S. is crumbling and collapsing. They inherently, intuitively, and intellectually know that the U.S. empire, look at Biden, Joe Biden, that's the guy that's going to fix things. All you got to do is look at our leaders, Biden and Kamala Harris, Trump, on and on and on, and say these people are going to hell. Obama was a fraud. The whole crew. Keep up the fabulous work, Garland. We need your voice and insight. Thank you, Sandy. All right, and don't forget, everybody, I am on. Thank you, BHL. Okay, BHL. Thanks a lot. Don't forget, there's things scrolling across. I got to run. Everybody, become don't forget Rockfin over there. Go over there in case they throw me off Twitter. You need to go over there. It's absolutely free to become a member. Absolutely free to become a member of Rockfin. You can become a subscriber for I don't know if it's $9.99, $12.99, $14.99. It's changed. I don't know what it is, but you can become a subscriber. You don't have to become a subscriber, but Rockfin is a channel. It's a free speech channel, and they don't do advertisements and subscriptions of what keeps them on the air. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it if you can do that. If you can't, no problem. If you don't have money, don't donate to me in any way, shape, or form. Use that for your family. Use that to take care of yourself. If you can help keep the channel strong, and you can, don't forget to follow me on Telegram. Then there's Patreon. There's buymeacoffee.com/GarlandNH and things of that nature, and Cash App and all that stuff. If you can afford it, I appreciate it. If you can't, keep your money to yourself. Enjoy it and just share the stuff on your social media platforms. Click the like button. Will 527 people, can we get 527 likes? That's important. Make sure you become a member of Rockfin. Make sure you share this and follow me on Telegram. Thanks a lot, everybody. I appreciate you taking your time out of your morning to spend a few minutes with me. Peace. I'm out.